Welcome to the Francis Clark Center's webinar series. Our broadcast will begin shortly. In addition to webinars, we also offer a robust selection of teaching resources on our website, claviercompanion.com. These resources include archives of all articles from our print publication, Piano Magazine, intermediate and advanced repertoire video series, one-on-one mentorship opportunities, and information about our in-person education opportunities such as NCKP The Piano Conference and summer intensives. Make sure to follow us on our social media platforms to get updates on all of these resources and more. As always, thank you for your loyal support of the Francis Clark Center and our many divisions. We are grateful to be in service to such an amazing and ever-growing group of educators and musicians. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the broadcast.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Diana Dumlavwalla, and I'm Assistant Professor of Piano Pedagogy at Florida State University. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to this webinar entitled Striving for Excellence in Online Pedagogy, Characteristics of Expert Teachers Using the Video Conferencing Format. It's being presented by the Francis Clark Center, and I would just like to thank especially Allison Chinnick, who's behind the scenes and making sure that all of this works. The thought of this new lesson environment would make many teachers shudder just 10 to 15 years ago. Many wondered, including myself, how could it be possible to replicate the intricate dynamics of a one-on-one in-person lesson over a digital connection? And I'm sure many of you were even just thinking that just a week ago even. However, with the advances in technology, the creativity of talented teachers and open-minded students and families, the popularity of online lessons has grown exponentially in recent years. Many can be very apprehensive of this technology. I'm not particularly tech savvy. I just look up something or Google it if I'm trying to figure out how to do something new online or through the laptop or tablet or something like that. So I come to you in this presentation as someone who's not a very tech savvy person and just making do with what I have. This innovative lesson setting is definitely here to stay, and with the current pandemic that is affecting our daily lives, more teachers are wading into this new territory now more than ever before. I think it is important for us to be familiar with this lesson format and the characteristics of successful online teachers. In this presentation, we'll touch on a number of topics related to online teaching, all within the framework of characteristics that make online teachers successful. I feel that it is important that by identifying these positive traits, you too can become successful online teachers. The first characteristic is understand the nature of the lesson setting. So why teach online? Well, there are many reasons for teaching online other than maintaining income during this current pandemic. Online lessons offer teachers the chance to expand their market of potential students. They're not constrained by the limitations of distance, time zones, and transportation. The chance to work with students from other time zones can be really appealing. They can help with filling up the daytime slots teachers often crave to fill, like early afternoons and mornings. Online lessons can give you more flexibility and thereby offer greater conveniences for students and their families. For example, instead of offering makeup lessons for sessions that could be missed to minor illnesses due to the common cold, etc., or if perhaps a student doesn't have transportation that particular day, teachers can provide online instruction during the same time slot. There's no wasted time, the student's progress can continue, and parents are satisfied because the lesson took place. And of course, during this current situation in an emergency, you can ensure that you can still maintain your income and keep those lessons going. Also, students, since they're not in school right now, I'm sure parents are looking for something for them to do during the day. Finally, for those students who are completely on the technology bandwagon, online lessons could actually be more interesting and motivating than in-person lessons due to the digital nature of the lesson environment. I've heard anecdotes from teachers who say, just because I show up on the screen makes me more interesting for my students. The second characteristic Successful online teachers pay attention to the setup of both themselves and the student. You don't really need much to get started with online piano lessons. The teacher and the student will each need a quiet, distraction-free space, a piano or keyboard, laptop or tablet device, and a stand to support the device. A strong and reliable internet connection is needed and a video conferencing program. I was chatting with JP Casarati earlier this week, and he is very tech savvy and knows a lot about online teaching. He's an expert in it, and you'll see a video of him later on in this presentation. And he was suggesting that we should aim for a minimum of 10 to 15 megabytes per second. And that's all we really need. Many of us have access to internet that is much faster than that. And he said that if we aim for 10 to 15 megabytes per second, that should be sufficient. Using a cell phone is possible, but I don't feel it's necessarily ideal since the screen size is smaller. However, if that's all you have, then definitely start with that. Sometimes a Wi-Fi connection can be inconsistent, and so if possible, it may be necessary to switch to a wired connection using an Ethernet cord, so you can experiment with trying that out. It's not necessary to purchase an external microphone and speaker right away, since the ones that are embedded in laptops and tablets these days are usually of very good quality. Also, you might not be wanting to make a significant financial commitment right away, especially since online lessons these days are just a temporary situation. This pandemic will hopefully soon end, and we'll be able to get back to our regular daily lives. So just start out with what you have and with what you're comfortable with. It won't sound like the student and teacher are in the same room, but the sound quality can be sufficient for many. For those who do want to upgrade to external equipment, I'll provide some suggestions later. So the basic equipment and setup. Both teacher and student or parent should pay attention to the setup of the laptop or tablet device. It is important that the camera catches the full playing apparatus of the individual at the piano so that posture can be observed. This is especially important for the student. You want to be able to see from head to toe the student's image. I think it's important that the teacher and student have a clear view of each other's face as well. Facial expressions is an important part of nonverbal communication. I'm sure you've experienced many times when you might be asking a student in their in-person lesson, do you understand what I'm saying? And they might be nodding their head, yes, but you could see the panic in their eyes that they don't really understand what you're saying. So I do think it is important to see that facial expression. Placing a laptop on an adjustable music stand like a Manhasset that I have here in this slide, a Manhasset stand, works perfectly as one can experiment with the height and angle of the laptop. Music stands like these are very sturdy and you can adjust the height and the angle. I wouldn't use the wired stands that are more portable that you can take around with you. Those aren't very stable at all. And the height that you can adjust is not as varied. If you or your student only have a phone, there are many phone stand hacks that are available out there. You might have a phone stand yourself, but if you don't, Google camera phone stand hack. And I think the first option that shows up there on a Google search shows a number of different ways that you can create a stand for your phone using credit cards, binder clips, all sorts of things. So there are all sorts of creative ways that you can ensure your phone or your tablet or whatever will be perched up properly so that the student can see you. Tablets can be mounted on a tablet stand, such as this affordable one on Amazon, and the height and angle can also be adjusted. There is a handout available that goes along with this webinar, and I've included all the links for products that I've talked about in this presentation, as well as links to other teachers' blogs and websites citing information regarding online lessons. This is just one example of a tablet stand, and I've seen over social media in the past week so many more other options. It is important to emphasize to parents that involvement in their child's music education will still be needed, even with online lessons. Young children especially will need the help to properly set up the equipment, and parents still have an influential role with daily practice. They're still going to have to remind their students to practice every day. The 4 video conferencing platforms that seem to be most used right now are Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, and also Google Hangouts. Behind my picture over there, I've just included the icons for those 4 video conferencing platforms. And recently I've noticed that Zoom tends to have the best sound quality right now and video quality as well. Even if you might have a preferred video conferencing platform, I would highly recommend that you and your students create accounts with all 4 applications or as many applications as you can. Sometimes the connection isn't so good on one application, and if you can quickly switch to another application within the lesson, then you won't be wasting time and you'll be able to continue on with the lesson. When I started teaching online lessons several years ago, I used this strategy and I found that it helped immensely. I had Skype on, I had FaceTime on, I had everything ready. I wasn't using all video conferencing platforms at the same time, but I had everything ready so that if the connection on Skype wasn't so good, I could quickly move to FaceTime. Now that Zoom is available, I have another option. So I think it's just better to be over-prepared. Both the teacher and the student, if both teacher and the student are using digital keyboards, then I would highly recommend that they both purchase and install Internet MIDI. So some teachers teach on digital keyboards and not acoustic pianos. So if you are on a digital keyboard and your student is also on the same thing, definitely purchase this. It's a software program that connects MIDI-capable devices so that the sound created at one location is heard simultaneously at the other remote location as if it's coming through their own keyboard. So you'll be able to hear things in real time and you won't have that lag that's caused by latency that's often experienced using web conferencing softwares. Excuse me. Also, timewarptech.com is the website where you can purchase this program, and I've also included that link on the handout. So easing into online lessons, especially during this period of time when people are really stressed out, all parties may be a bit apprehensive delving into this alternative lesson environment. Teachers will want to make sure both they and their students are comfortable with the new arrangement. Therefore, I think it is worthwhile to have some trial run lessons before making the full commitment. I would highly suggest this as you try to encourage your parents and their families to move to online lessons. Offer them maybe a 15-minute online lesson, trial run lesson, and that way they can see how things work. If you can provide them a handout for logging in, for joining these different web conferencing platforms, that will all help to make them feel more comfortable with this new lesson setting. Remember, everyone is really stressed out right now. I've seen teachers stating that they're in a state of shock, really, because a lot of their students have decided not to continue with lessons at this time. Just be very kind to them and state that the door would be open later on, and who knows, in a week or so they might come back. Again, students are at home. They often don't have a whole lot of things to do. Schools aren't providing a lot of homework, and so they might later come around and say, you know, I really do want to try some piano lessons online, and that way they can at least keep their progress going. As mentioned earlier, offering online lessons in lieu of makeup lessons when this whole pandemic is over can provide an added convenience for teachers, students, and parents, even in normal times. And additionally, this arrangement can also be a way for teachers to gradually gain experience in this area. So the advantages and disadvantages related to this online setup. This goes back to characteristic number 1, understanding the nature of this lesson setting. There are numerous advantages for teaching online lessons, both from the business and pedagogical perspective. As we talked about earlier, it provides more options for students and their families, and you as teachers can expand your business practices. You'll be able to fill up more hours and you won't always necessarily have to teach in the evenings. Online lessons may also provide opportunities to students in remote areas who may not have access to a qualified piano teacher. Finally, the fact that students and parents don't need to leave their home makes online lessons a very convenient option for them. Teacher choice is also a significant advantage of online lessons. If a student or teacher moves far away, sometimes the student and their family may have a difficult time finding a suitable teacher. With the online lesson setting, the student no longer needs to worry about getting accustomed to a new personality and teaching style. This can work out really well because the student and teacher already have an established relationship. And so with that established relationship, they'll be able to overcome some of the drawbacks of online lessons more effectively. This is how I got started in teaching online lessons. I moved from Ontario to Florida, and during that time, some of my students needed a little bit of they were getting used to a new teacher and they just needed some extra help. And so I was able to still have lessons with them for a specific period of time, and I'll talk more about that a bit later. From the pedagogical standpoint, there are several benefits teachers and students experience in this lesson setting. Students can learn to be even more independent and resourceful in this setting, especially if they are motivated. And this leads us to our third characteristic of successful online teachers. They use this lesson setting to help make their students become more independent. There's a saying that says we teach ourselves out of a job. We want our students to eventually be able to not need us at all at the end of their lessons so that they can learn pieces on their own and they can find enjoyment out of piano playing. So online lessons can help us teach our students to gain that independence. For example, with the basic setup of a laptop or tablet device, instrument, and no other applications, students will have to annotate their own hard copy scores. This can lead to greater understanding of concepts and can help students to take ownership of their work and practice. You can pitch it to them, and I saw one teacher on social media this past week. She said she's pitching it to students as, look, you get to do all the stuff that I usually get to do. You get to do all the teacher stuff. And so if you pitch it to them like that, like, oh, you get to mark in the score just like I usually do in your lessons, perhaps they would find excitement out of that. And I think students always like pretending to be the teacher. I know I did when I was a student. Allison's just going to show us a short clip here of one student annotating articulation directions in her score. This video example is also a great reason why it's important to put numbers for your measures in your score. This example is from an early lesson that I did when I was just starting out with teaching online, and I hadn't yet marked in, or hadn't yet asked the student to mark in her bar numbers. And so you'll see how my explanation for how to get her to figure out what part of the piece I was referring to is a little bit lengthy. And if I asked her to number her bars or measures, she would have been able to get to that point quickly. Anyway, Allison, if you could please show that video.
So after you have the two repeated notes, like the two repeated Ds, and then you go up to the B, and then you have the two repeated Ds, and you go up to the C, can you put a check mark between those, like just before the bar line here? I'll show you what I mean. Because I don't want you to connect the thumb to the next note. Off. Off. Okay? Yep, looks good.
Just turning on my mic there again. Great, thank you, Allison. So it was very easy actually to teach the students how to annotate their scores, and I would always check to make sure that they were annotating it properly. We were able to get into a routine very quickly so that they would show me their score right away and I could see it. And other than the fact that I didn't number the bars, or I didn't ask her to number the bars, and that took up some time, getting her to annotate and put those check marks didn't really take a whole lot of time away from the lesson. Additionally, I quickly realized that I had to verbalize my musical suggestions more than providing demonstrations at the piano. I found that this really helped the students to internalize what they had to do at the piano, giving them a tangible and concrete description of the artistic intentions. So one of the students mentioned that she really appreciated those verbal descriptions that were a little bit more descriptive, for lack of a better word. She found that when she had to perform in a competition or in festival, it was easier for her to memorize because she was able to refer back to those verbal descriptions. So she had something tangible that she could hang on to later on when she was in performance. Also, just referring back to those annotations of the articulation directions, I think that that student was able to remember what she had to do later on more effectively because she actually had to mark it in herself. Another advantage, let's just go back to this slide. Another advantage is that students can refer back to recorded lessons in the online setting. So if you don't already record your lessons on a weekly basis, if you're switching to online lessons, I highly recommend that you take advantage of this. Since audio and visual are already set up, it's very easy to record and students can relive the lesson partway through the week. So the camera's already there, the sound's already there, and with Zoom, with Skype, and I'm not sure about FaceTime, but I know Google Hangouts, they all have options for you to record. Rewatching a lesson can be part of a student's practice, and they can keep up and make sure that they're following up with all the instructions that you gave them during that week. There are also advantages from the teacher's perspective. We have to refine certain areas of our pedagogical development, including verbal explanations and diagnostic skills. For me, I learned that I heavily rely on the tactile approach when explaining the proper use of the playing apparatus, and that I could still improve my verbal descriptions. I like to ensure that the students have good posture, and I may gently touch them on the shoulder to remind them to keep their shoulders down or to remind them that they have to sit tall. I frequently help them with their arm position, and I'm helping them to feel a sense of release in their arms. So with their permission, I'm always making sure in a tactile manner that everything is working properly. But with online lessons, I quickly realized that I couldn't do that. And I discovered that I had to improve those verbal descriptions so that they could recreate those sensations at home. Also, online instruction can keep teachers on their toes, as they need to have a keen eye and ear to spot problems and inconsistencies carefully through the digital medium. It almost takes more energy. You really have to be watching very carefully and listening extremely carefully so that you can ensure that you're diagnosing students' playing issues properly. Okay, we'll move on to the disadvantages, or maybe we can put a more positive spin on it, the challenges of online lessons. They're definitely not without their drawbacks, and I don't think we should shy away from acknowledging those challenges and drawbacks. It is important to be aware of them so that we can address them and teach accordingly. One of the biggest challenges teachers have to face is the lack of physical presence, and I just alluded to that earlier. I know that there are online piano teachers who don't feel that this has a positive negative impact, or has a potential negative impact on their lessons and their students' progress. However, for me, probably because I haven't been teaching online as much as those other experts, I feel that it is still a challenge that I have to figure out how to overcome, and I am still working on that. I suppose it's possible to explain these concepts to the attending parent, but in my experience, sometimes parents don't really always get it either. I like to ensure that a student's wrist movement is very flexible when they're playing, and so sometimes if I explain that to a parent, they actually might not grasp that earlier than the student. So I just have to figure out ways to work around that. Therefore, I think that due to the lack of physical presence, it would be difficult to start a young beginner in this environment. For all of us who are teaching online as a way to just make it through this pandemic, you've already established a relationship with the student. They already understand you, they understand your ways of teaching, and so you can refer back to those experiences that they had with you in their in-person lessons, and so it won't be as big of an issue. In addition to helping them understand and experience a healthy playing apparatus, it can be hard to build a personal rapport with someone over Zoom or Skype, especially a young child. Young children are too young to clue into the nuances of communication, and as a result, might not forge a personal connection with the teacher, which, as we know, is so important with piano lessons. Even with older students, such as teenagers and adults, there can be an emotional and personal disconnect. It will depend on how the student and the teacher strive to engage one another. However, as I mentioned earlier, if you're just starting to teach online now with your current students, you're already at an advantage because you have already established that relationship with the student, and everyone knows that they're going to be going back to in-person lessons once this health emergency is over. Another challenge to overcome is the issue of latency, resulting in a lag or delay of the sound. The amount of time it takes for the sound or picture to be transmitted over the digital connection may only be a split second, but this lag certainly makes a difference for us musicians. Better experts than me can provide a more technical explanation of why there is that lag and latency. It makes it impossible for teachers to coach their students along as they play, or even play duets with their students. So I'm always one to be singing along and coaching and conducting and counting along with my student while they're playing. But I can't do that with online lessons because it's not going to be at the same time that they're playing, and it's just going to be confusing everyone. Both teachers and students need to learn to listen and wait for the other party to finish speaking or playing before continuing on with the conversation. So maybe online lessons will make us better listeners because we're going to have to listen to everything first before we can actually comment. The last, and for me, the most crucial disadvantage associated with online lessons is the fact that it is not possible to completely evaluate and provide suggestions for tone quality. The quality of a pianist's tone cannot really be adequately addressed right now using this basic setup with an acoustic piano. The students won't be able to hear what truly good tone quality is, and the teacher won't be able to assess if the student is developing this very important artistic skill. The use of headphones or earbuds can help this somewhat so you don't get a boomy, echoey sound. One workaround that I've discovered is that I've asked students to send recordings of them playing their entire repertoire or technique or whatever, sending that to me before the lesson. That way I can listen to their recording and that sound quality is going to be way better. I can listen to that at the beginning of the lesson and so use up some of the lesson time to hear what they're playing. And then I use the video conferencing to talk to them about what they need to change and to demonstrate and to show what needs to happen in order to improve their playing. So I highly suggest that. Make sure that your students send you video recordings of them playing first, and then you use the lesson time to talk about what needs to change. Shanna Kirk, in the webinar that she gave on Monday, she also gave a really great hack for if you're experiencing a tinny kind of sound. She suggested putting on a hoodie on and putting it over your ears and getting a student to do that, and that improved the sound. There was quite a big difference there, so it was really neat to see that hack. Also, with the issue of playing duets with students, you can't play with them because of the lag, but you could record your teacher duet part, send that to them, have them play that on a different device than what they're using for the online lesson, and then you can watch them play that duet together. They could record themselves playing with your duet recorded part. And then that can help them maintain steady pulse, all the reasons why we play along with our students. So even though there are these disadvantages, there are different things that we can use to work around with those disadvantages and help minimize what challenge they may create. And even if a teacher and student are using digital instruments with internet MIDI, the full extent of tone quality can't be addressed because they're using digital instruments. Right now, the best solution for this issue is for the student and the teacher to be working with Yamaha disc claviers, which are MIDI-capable acoustic instruments. If you don't know what a disc clavier is, please Google it, and you'll see that Yamaha has come out, and it's been around for some time, with this wonderful acoustic piano. So it has all the capabilities of an acoustic piano, but it has MIDI capabilities as well. And so if you connect using internet MIDI with those, with an instrument, with a disc clavier on the teacher side and a disc clavier on the student side, then you can hear what each other is playing in real time without a lag, and you'd be able to play along with them. Unfortunately, the cost of these instruments can be prohibitive for some. We can't all go out and just buy a new disc clavier right now. So, but that can be on our wish list for the future. So as I mentioned earlier, record those pieces so that you can hear them outside the lesson, the online lesson, or even at the very beginning of the online lesson. That will be the workaround for that. So just like traditional lessons, it is important to keep a record of what takes place in each lesson and what the student has to practice. This leads us to our fourth characteristic, which is be organized. Expert online teachers are organized. In lieu of a lesson notebook or an assignment notebook, teachers can email lesson notes to their students. However, I recommend using one shared Google document for each student. So if you have a Google Drive, you can create a Google document that you can share with each student, so everyone would have their own document, and you can write the lesson notes there. That way you don't have to keep emailing each other back and forth. And all the notes will be in one place. They won't be scattered around different emails. What's great with Google Docs is that students can write comments. If you look here, I can't really show, but in the top right-hand corner to the left of the share button on that PowerPoint slide that's up, there's a little comment box. And so students can write little comments and say, I don't understand what you mean by this, or they can ask questions. Also, if you put the dates in bold headings, or if you change the headings, what it does is it creates an automatic outline on the left-hand side. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen that there's an outline that was created, a table of contents, and that's automatically done by Google Docs if you bold the different headings. So I organized this by date so that the parent and the teacher could go back and look to what was done in previous lessons easily. As I mentioned earlier, I would also highly recommend recording online lessons as an added bonus feature for this lesson environment. Since the camera and microphone are already available at both ends, this takes very little effort on the teacher's part. As I mentioned earlier, Zoom and Skype already have an embedded record function. And with Zoom, with 2 or more devices, you can actually create a multi-camera view for your students. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So up on the screen here, I've just put a screenshot of what it might look like when you're in a Zoom meeting. So the piano on the top left-hand side would be my student's piano. And I have 2 different cameras here. So you see a half picture of me and then a picture of the side view of my piano. If you look at the bottom arrow, it's pointing to the record button. So once you're in the Zoom conversation or the Zoom call, just click on that record button and it will automatically record it for you. I would then recommend that you go up to the top right-hand corner and make sure that you click on Gallery View. If you click Gallery View, that will make sure that all your camera images and the image of your student will be showing in the same screen, so that when you record and the student watches that recording later on, they'll be able to see everything and they'll be able to see everyone. So make sure you change that to Gallery View. In Zoom, as I mentioned, you can create a multi-camera view for your students. And this brilliant idea comes from Jeremy Siskind of Fullerton College. He posted this on social media earlier this week, and it's a really, really, really great idea. So let me just go back to that other slide. So what he suggested was you just sign in to the same Zoom link with all the devices that you're using. So I'm using my laptop and I'm using my cell phone. And so I just sign into the same link. And what it does is that it creates, it's like there's one person joining with their cell phone and one person joining with the laptop and then your student as well. So that creates the multi-view approach. I hope I'm explaining that clearly enough. So just sign into that same link and the image with all of your cameras will be shown. I don't know what this does to sound, but Jeremy did suggest that you just turn off the microphone of all but one of your devices. So you leave one microphone on from your device so that you don't get the reverberation from the other microphones. Once you finish the recording and once you finish the call, a folder with MP4 recordings will appear on your desktop. And this is what the recording will look like. Could you please show that next video, Allison? So that's what that recording will look like. We can go back to that slide, please. You could see from that example that I was kind of holding up my cell phone. I didn't have a trick for an overhead view. I don't have a boom stand. I'm not prepared in that way. I didn't go out and buy one. But my student and my PhD student and TA, Ricardo Plazanato, he has come up with a wonderful hack for that if you don't have a boom stand. So look at the picture on the left. He has created a stand using a bunch of books, a utensil, a large serving utensil from the kitchen. And then he put this large angel, which is a little bit heavy so that it can keep everything in one place. And then he put the cell phone on top of the I can't even remember what it's called right now, but that kitchen utensil. And then that created the view that he has there right now. So there are all sorts of different types of hacks. If you do not have the proper stands and equipment, there are other ways to get around that. If you're recording by Skype, just go to the bottom right-hand corner. There are 3 dots found on that side, and click on that and press record, and it will record the conversation for you, and there will be side-by-side shots so that you can see yourself and the student will be able to see you from that recorded file. Once the call is finished, the recorded file will appear in the chat window for your student. I think it might show up here. Yep. So it'll show up here in the chat window for the student, and then you can download that. Again, I've put an arrow. There's another 3 little dots that show up on the top right-hand corner of the clip, and then you can download that and share it with your student. I think for FaceTime, you can use QuickTime on your Apple desktop or laptop device to record lessons. You can move the recording files or the recorded files to a shared cloud folder like Google Drive or Dropbox so that students can easily access them. I wouldn't recommend sending them over email because the files are going to be way too big and it'll take forever to send those emails. So share them in a cloud folder or quickly upload it to YouTube, mark it as unlisted, and then include the link on the lesson assignment sheet. So remember that Google Doc that I showed earlier with the different dates of the lesson assignments. I could just include the lesson link at the bottom of that lesson assignment, and then it's right there. The student would be looking at their assignments, what they have to practice that week, and voila, the assignment link or the lesson link is right there, and they can click on that very easily. They won't be able to say, oh, I couldn't find it, or my parents couldn't open the email. It will be right there. You're reducing any sort of excuses that they could possibly come up with. Reviewing a lesson recording once or several times during a week most definitely helps students to absorb new concepts more effectively. And the other advantage with the YouTube lesson link is that you will be able to tell how many times they'll be able to view the recording. So on YouTube, it shows how many times the video is shown. And if you mark it as unlisted and only provide the link to your student, you know that they're the only ones watching it. So you'll be able to tell how many times they're watching it. Of course, they could just kind of press play and then watch it for 5 minutes and not watch the whole thing. But at least you know that they've clicked on it. The next characteristic for successful online teaching is improve your technological setup as you gain more experience. So again, if you're just starting off, start off with the basic setup, and once you feel comfortable, then move to adding different things. For those who've mastered the basic setup, here are some suggestions for equipment and apps. SuperScore is the premier app for viewing, managing, and interacting with your library of musical scores. So if you want to go digital with all your scores, you can use SuperScore, or Orpheus or Orpheus is available on Androids. That way you can mark up your digital score, send it to your student. But I kind of like doing it the old-fashioned way anyway, because students will mark it up themselves and again, help gain their independence. Home Concert Extreme provides digital accompaniment and follows how the pianist plays, changing the tempo, dynamics, etc. through MIDI files. This is especially helpful for online lessons since teachers and students can't play together. So it has a wide variety of different digital accompaniments, and you can adjust the tempo and the dynamics accordingly. iReal Pro also provides backing tracks for popular music so that students can play with a real sounding band. There's also a large selection of chord charts. And there are so many more apps. I don't have time to go into all of them, but many experts are providing suggestions for that. If you want to improve the images of your online lessons, consider purchasing an external webcam, such as a Logitech C920 HD Pro webcam. Again, this link is available on that handout. I did hear that it's not available on Amazon anymore. Perhaps they're sold out. I did check Best Buy and it seems like it's still available there. This seems to be the most highly recommended webcam from most online teachers. So I would just go with that. The price range is about $70, $80 to $100 for that. Recommendations for external microphones and speakers include the Blue Snowball or Blue Yeti. And the company Edifier also offers a number of good options for external speakers. I recently got my Blue Yeti as a Christmas gift over this past year, and I found that it has significantly increased and improved the sound quality for me. At some point, those who find that they do a bulk of their teaching online may want to look into using multiple cameras, capturing different angles like I showed earlier. So once you get comfortable with that basic setup, start maybe having something overhead so that students can see your fingering even more clearly. Characteristic number 6, use vivid descriptions and analogies and demonstrate a lot. Since you're not physically present, you have to describe what you want the student to internalize so well so that they can recreate it themselves. You can't help them feel something physically. You have to help them through your verbal descriptions and your modeling. I'm going to show a video of Shirley Kirsten, who is in California. She has been teaching online for quite some time. I've included a link to her blog on the handout. And in this video, you'll see her and hear her explaining to a student how to play scales with a more smooth and legato line. So Allison, if we could show that video, please.
I think you understand that scale really well, and you have to like surrender to the imagined sound that you want, which is probably not grabbing it so much, but floating it once again. So the theme of tonight's lesson is float your scales. Float-o, lead-o, ro, float-o. It's all vowels, no consonants tonight. And I'm not playing loud because you know what? I can turn around and still float it with a deeper in the keys, right approach. More weight. Let's say I want to do this, yeah. But I'm still not thumping any notes. I'm not making it obvious that there are consonants, but I'm still playing with vowels, don't you think?
Yeah.
I could have a better regulated piano to help my mental image, but now let's see if you can do a soft with vowels instead of consonants. With the vowels soft, remember I'm making the metaphor that we play with vowels instead of consonants. That means no pokey notes. That was really very good, and I have that on video. It was really astoundingly better than what you were doing just before when you were playing the piano in general. It was just floated into a deeper part of the ocean of the piano, right?
I felt like I was using my wrists more.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was really good. It really communicated an emotion by what you did just now. So I want you to be aware of what it felt like, what you imagined you wanted to hear. How did you do it? You know, 3 things.
Allison, we can move back
to
to
do that
the
over and again when you want to do it.
slideshow.
Because that's good playing.
All right, thank you. So I really liked her analogy of vowels versus consonants. I think it was very effective. I think the next thing that she talks about in this lesson is the physical use of the wrist to help create a smoother flow there. The 7th characteristic, be effusive with your enthusiasm. You need to transcend that online barrier that can affect forming a connection with the student. So in this next video, João Paulo Casarotti from Louisiana, he addresses phrasing with his student. He uses an additive approach and works bit by bit and gives lots of encouragement. And it's just really nice to see the positive reinforcement that he provides the student after she has, through this, I think it's a 3-minute segment, so that she feels like she's accomplished something because she did. Also note the excellent setup for the student. The student's camera is sort of from an angle from behind so that the teacher can see the entire student, their hands at the keyboard, and a little bit of their face as well. Shanna Kirk talks about that setup in her first webinar. So Allison, if we could please show that video, and it starts at 5 minutes and 45 seconds, that would be great. Thank you.
Ok, mas ó, deixa eu ouvir. Until there. Remember, I hear. I'm not listening to the end. I should hear through the whole thing. Right? To the left. more time for me, and then do it together just from measure 3 and measure 4. Yes, now add the right hand with that. Keep phrasing the left hand. Yeah, for some reason I hear you going up, and then I don't hear. Right? Until here, and then come back. Still arm on every note. It's not. See what I mean? Try to get the left hand. Yes, now together, please. Ah, really beautiful, really beautiful. But try now from the beginning then. Yes. In the sequence. 18. Don't rush. Yes. Going to the cadence. Yeah, and then here. Really good, Alice. Really good. Don't connect it. And it's not. But. And conclude it, right? I'm really enjoying. I'm gonna buy that CD for your bar now of you playing bar as soon as you get it done. This work, really nice. And don't accent it.
All right. Thank you. So when he said, I'm going to buy that CD of your Bach, I just think that that would really lift the student's spirit. And you could see that she appreciated that comment. Joao is from Brazil. Sometimes he goes off and speaks Portuguese in his lessons, and it just makes it that much more exciting and colorful. All right, characteristic number 8. This is the last characteristic I've identified. There are more characteristics, but this is what I've distilled from watching videos of expert online teachers and from my own experience as well. Just because you're not physically present with the student doesn't mean you should avoid addressing the physical aspect of playing the piano. I think it's still really, really, really important to address body alignment and a healthy playing technique. In this video, Sheila Page, she's been teaching online for quite some time. She addresses the seated or the sitting position of a student and her posture. And she takes the time to show the difference between right and wrong and change the angles of the camera. So if we could please have that video, Allison.
Okay, so when you lean forward and back, I should, let me see if I can get my right camera to show you one. Ah, that's what I want. Okay. So what you're doing is this. And I want you to be just straight back. And then when you lean the whole body forward and back. Right. You're still arching your back a little bit. Yeah, the pelvis is still a little tilted forward. Still a little this way. You want to feel very free at the hip joint, so you can move left and right, and forward and back. Good. Okay.
Great. I think my microphone is back on. All right, resources. On your handouts, I've listed a number of resources, articles, websites, other stuff that I haven't even talked about in this presentation, so please check out the handout. I believe that the handout will be available on the website underneath the link for the replay of this webinar. I'd also like to draw your attention to an article that I wrote for the MTNA Journal in 2017. It highlights my experiences and the perceptions of my students and their parents when we transitioned from in-person to online lessons. Since the era of online lessons is still in its infancy stage, research in this area is still limited. If you are an MTNA member, you'll have access to their e-journal. If you are not an MTNA member, highly encourage you to be one, just as like we should all be members of the Francis Clark Center. But you can still access that article that I wrote. If you go to mtna.org, look on their menu, click on Stay Informed, go to MTNA e-journal, and then Articles of the Year. My article it happens to be listed there. I will also make this PowerPoint available so that you can easily see what I've been trying to show here. And also, I've written another article that has just been made available online on the Francis Clark Center website. It is going to be in print in Piano Magazine, but they're publishing it and making it available now earlier because of the current times we're in. Go to claviercompanion.com, click on the red bar that says resources for COVID-19. And then once you're on that page where it shows all these emergency webinars, scroll down and then you'll see a link to that article there. So at this time, I would like to take any questions, and I will put my email up here in case you have questions that you'd like to email me. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm willing to go a little bit over, Allison, if we need to. So happy to take questions at this point.
Thank you so much, Diana. You have done an incredible job at addressing and thinking ahead of time what the questions would be in the chat. So I think you've covered so many of the things that people have questions about.
Okay, great.
I will just grab a couple here that seem to linger. A few people have asked about the setup and wonder if it impacts your connection if students don't have good cameras or microphones at home.
If it impacts the connection, I don't know if it would impact necessarily my connection, but it would impact their the video quality and their audio quality that they're sending over to you. So it won't impact your internet connection because your internet connection is for your location only. So if they don't have good cameras or microphones at home, yes, it would affect what you're receiving from them, but not the actual connection. But I would like to say, like, the current devices that we have right now, cell phones, tablets, laptops, they have fairly decent cameras and microphones. So that possibility is available. And if anything at all, you could move to more of a quasi-asynchronous online lesson approach where they're sending videos and then you send them videos back, so it's not in real time.
Thank you. A few people were not familiar with the hoodie hack that you mentioned. Could you just describe that quickly, please?
Sure, yeah. So Shanna, she demonstrated, she showed she had a student play, and the sound was very tinny. It just didn't have that great of a quality of sound to it. So then she got the student to put on a hoodie, so a sweater with a hood on it. And so he put that sweater on, he put the hood over his head, and he played, and voila, the sound was so much better. It was really quite miraculous, actually, for me. I was very impressed. And so if you want to see that demonstration, all the webinars from this week are available on the website. And go to the first webinar that was shown this Monday. So that would be March the 16th. With Shanna Kirk, and that demonstration is available there.
Thank you. What do you find to be the best way for students to send you recordings? I know you mentioned using a file hosting site, but what do you use?
I get students to, they sometimes send it to me through Facebook Messenger. Sometimes that's the easiest way for them to send it to me. And maybe sometimes the recording is broken up, so they might just send me, if they're playing a sonatina, the exposition with one recording, development with another recording. But it would also be, if I'm able to train them and get them into the habit of doing this, it would be easy for them to send me recordings via YouTube as well. So they would upload their video to YouTube and then send it along. Very often, the students will have a better idea of how to do this than the parents. So if you can talk to the student directly and explain to them what you want them to do, they'll likely be able to do it.
Thank you. So just one last question here about about the setup. Do you find it necessary to use multiple cameras, and do you need external speakers? What do you recommend for teachers that are finding themselves in this situation right now?
Right. When I started teaching, I just had my laptop and that was it. I didn't have any multiple cameras. I didn't know even how to attach other cameras and make sure I could toggle between their images. I had the laptop that I'm using right now, and if I wanted to show some fingering that was more clear, I would just hold the laptop as if I was holding a baby in front of me and then showing my fingers that way. If you're using a cell phone, that will be a little bit easier because it's more portable and then you can just show on top what you're doing. But it's not necessary at all to have multiple cameras. I would also like to say that I was surprised at how easy it was to figure out if students were playing with the right fingering or not. I was really apprehensive and worried that I wouldn't be able to tell right away, but I was able to tell pretty quickly. Even with a side angle of them, I could see quite easily. I just had to look very closely. And as we know, fingering is kind of like the foundational aspect of playing. And so if the fingering isn't right, it's going to affect their tone quality. It's going to affect the fluency of their playing. It's going to affect their rhythmic approach. So there are many telltale signs if fingering isn't going to be, if they're not playing with the right fingering. For microphones, again, it's not necessary to get an external microphone or even an external speaker. I just got this microphone recently, and then I also recently bought a Bluetooth speaker recently that provides a better sound quality. But that's 3-4 years after I started teaching online.
Thank you. I wanted to just bring everybody's attention to all of the resources that we have and are adding to in the coming weeks. If you go to that link that I've posted in the chat, claviercompanion.com/COVID-19, you will see the replays of our 2 webinars we've already done this week, as well as the schedule of the webinars that are coming up. We had a few questions about teaching young students online and a few more specific technological questions. Tomorrow we have a webinar that is specifically dedicated to teaching young students online, so please tune in for that. And next week we will have a town hall discussion with leading technology experts. And so they can ask a lot more of, they can answer a lot more of those specific questions about external microphones or what kind of equipment is best. In the webinars this week, we wanted to provide you with information for getting you set up right away in the easiest way possible. And Diana, thank you so much for contributing to that. This has been a wonderful session. Please share these links with your colleagues and friends because we will be leaving all of these open for people to watch the replays as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Allison, Jennifer Snow, and all of the Francis Clark Center. And I'd just like to say it's wonderful that you're providing all the support for all the teachers. And to all teachers out there, hang in there. We'll get through this and stay healthy. Thank you.